Can we settle down, please? And can I invite the panelists to come on stage of sort, so that we could start. Okay. Settled. Okay, the concluding session and some of the points that we may discuss, we have already touched upon. But that was spoken in a different context, and moderators had to intervene to get back the focus on the project. But here, either with the specificities to project or in general, but this is coming back to the theme of this roundtable is how to strengthen urban design as a discipline, including practice and education and training, but seen through the lens of the practice, because as I reminded all of us in the early opening remarks, the academic program of urban design in India is more than 6 decades, or almost more than 5 decades, while the practice itself has flourished only in the last decade or so. So there is a compulsion now to re-look at what we are teaching in the experience and in the light of what we have accomplished so far, because as we have done projects, it has opened up both opportunities and actually highlighted not only the challenges but also the limitations of our own training. So it is in this context, and it's particularly very important for all of us here at CEPT and other institutions, as there are many people who are logging in and listening to this online. As always, we come prepared with a set of questions and frame a few points. And if this is true to the spirit of this event, this is just a framework. So we'll constantly improvise as we hear the views and yours, and as well as from online. So let me first begin. As I anticipated, many speakers, moderators, and questions kept on insisting on the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary sort of understanding of urban design, and how urban designers have to know this and that and whatnot. While all that is good and completely appreciated, because there is nothing like an individual or an individual discipline, and everyone has to work and connect with. But at the same time, for both the establishment of the profession and as well as how do we teach and train an urban designer. So if urban designer has to do everything that he or she is engaged with, then what could be the focus of this, both the program and thus the profession? So my first question is, can we make a distinction between working with a multidisciplinary team and what is the core competency or the specificities of urban designer and what that person can bring to the table? So in a sense, should we take the demand for a multicultural approach, multidisciplinary approach literally, and set up a practice and the education without any specific core focus and competency, or we make a clear distinction saying urban design has these specific things to contribute, while it also they're trained to work with different people. So the distinction between working as a multidisciplinary professional, ability to work, and the core competency of urban design. So is there anything specific to urban design or not? And should we focus on that? And I would request a brief opening statements addressing this question. Okay. Because if we believe that there is nothing specific to urban design, there is nothing core competency, then we'll have to completely rejig our academic program. And then when you come out, what do we offer to the market? What do you tell the recruiters? What do we tell people who are looking for a certain kind of approach and attitude? So, can we spend a brief opening remarks on this question of specificities of this profession? I'll start with, okay, Manoj. No, no, there is a mic here. I mean, I'm going to ask every one of you. You can't pass the baton, yeah? This is a compulsory question.
In fact, I had this uh, beginning in the last discussion, pre-noon discussion regarding this because it was initiated by one of our speakers. I strongly feel that urban design should be considered as a separate domain where it's kind of a bridging between urban planning and architecture. Where if you look at architecture, it is giving us expertise in designing buildings with all its paraphernalia, whatever aspects. And if you look at urban planning, as we discussed, it is a separate domain. But there are certain areas where you have to seriously look upon from an urban design point of view, where it is neither belongs to architecture or urban planning. So that area, I don't think that any other profession can seriously look into that except urban design. So my stand is that urban design should remain as a separate domain. It's a profession which has to be identified on its own.
You can go anti-clockwise. Not auspicious way to do it, but still, it's okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, but no, but we have, since we started this way, stop it.
I think when we look at UD discipline, I'm pretty clear on the core competency. We are looking at a large number of people coming together, working together, recreating together, and a large number of buildings coming together. So there's a lot of built environment there, and there's a lot of people centric activities there. Core competency has to emerge from these conditions. Sometimes these building conditions are at the edges of cities, and again, some aspects of that needs to be done. All these areas of heavy built intensities, cities are also seeing exchanges of people moving from in and out. That's also a very important concern. So we have to, in a sum, we have to understand what this new science of urban design or science of city would be in this new changing paradigm. So that's what we should gear up to.
Right, thank you. Building on both of your points, I think I'd go back to Surt's original definition of what urban design is, which is an urban minded profession at the nexus of architecture, landscape, and planning, as we all know. I do think that there is value in having a broad, strategic, and general understanding of complex issues. And that's what I think an urban designer actually brings to the table, the ability to be flexible and fluid and adapt and pick from different disciplines to be able to put together the whole. And I think that holistic perspective, which other disciplines don't really, teach. For example, architecture works in its own silo, planners work in their own silo, and we are at that vantage point where we can bring things together. And there's a lot of value in that, especially when we look at public projects which are very specific sector driven. We bring in that added value. So I think the fluidity in itself is the definition of the profession.
So, to me, it's really about solving an urban issue, and I don't think there can be this one classic definition anymore. And so I kind of really agree to Seetha from that perspective. I actually run a design school, and it's such a pain because you take in students as graphic designers and product designers and fashion designers, and then we practically put them into a washing machine, and the degree they get after 4 years is Bachelor's of Design because it's fundamentally training them to be design thinkers and getting completely breaking these silos. And I think urban design kind of nestles itself in that you have to have a vision and an understanding. Of course, you have to empathize with the issue, and I think from there be able to smartly understand, like was being discussed about whole negotiations, that what really is needed as a skill set to be able to solve that urban issue. And to me, that overarching ability would be an urban design issue. Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree that there is a space, between architecture and urban planning for urban designers with insights, with a view of bringing all of this together. But the place where I sometimes struggle when we work with the government is that when you want a structural engineer or an electrical engineer, you're very clear that you do want that professional. Or even if it's an urban planner, when you're putting together a terms of reference, I feel that the government officials are very clear about that. But in order to say that this particular project requires it to be led by an urban designer, I feel that we as a collective have a long way to go to improve that awareness.
Yes, I agree that we have a long way to go, and I agree that we need to have a. I mean, there is a special domain. Let's put it this way: every profession tackles a type of problem, and there's an architectural problem, there's a planning problem, there's an urban design problem that you're tackling, and we got to. And you need a specialist to do that, and if you keep doing that, you get better at it, and slowly practice and a body can emerge, which is called urban design practice, and it is emerging in the country. We are able to make a little conference where you get at least a dozen practitioners together, and there must be more than what we are talking about. And soon, in 3, 4, 5 years, there will be even more as Indian cities understand that these problems need a specialist problem solver. I think from an academic point of view, Srivathsan, I would say, as we say in CEPT all the time, we keep reminding ourselves that we are not training urban designers. We are training apprentice urban designers in some sense. We're sort of creating apprentices. And therefore, for an academic program, the best thing to do is to go to practitioners and find out what are the abilities that you need in your apprentices. It doesn't help to sit and try to think through by yourself what are the abilities, but to actually talk to practitioners and say, listen, if you need an apprentice, what's the kind of work you do? What's the kind of skills the person must have? So getting out of the room and instead of meditating and thinking and figuring out, best to ask practices. Nothing wrong in that. That's what all good schools do.
Yeah, I believe when you name something, then there is a distinction. So you don't call an urban designer as urban plan. You don't call an architect an urban plan. So you're making a distinction. However, well, they can work together. So the moment you engender, you give birth to a profession, whatever its history be, which means at that moment of baptism, of identifying something, which means comes along with it, even if it's not well formed at the moment of its birth, as it goes, it gets defined. So what Bimal is suggesting is one way to figure this out is probably ask the practitioners as to how do we identify what competencies to. So just following on that point, so Nishant, I'm going to ask you because you're an urban design firm. So how do we identify these specificities? Is it based on competencies, skill sets, or is it based on class of problems that they address? Suppose you call yourself urban designer. Imagine myself as a dumb client and I'm going to ask you, sorry sir, I know architect, I know planner, but please explain what urban design is. So how would you do that?
I think I would, since the discussion is also on technical issues, and I would still reassert that urban design is still also a creative discipline. So that leverage should be given to students. That in the academia, it allows for a creative vision for living together. Without that leverage, it becomes a little, it is like the bylaws we've been talking about. It is not allowing it to think how people live together. I mean, why did urban design come about? After Siam, 10 conferences were held, international congresses of architecture. No, there is a new method to think about how architecture comes together. With CERT, you said it should be looked as an urban design, not only as a rigid framework, but as a method of creating expression of how people come together, how it relates to many other conditions in the city. So, what I would look for, if you would say, I would look for certain core understanding of what is emerging in the city. That sort of that real condition, what you're looking at, I would look at, how much technical experience he has in understanding some of the emerging problems.
I'm going to put it that's a nut and bolt question. So I go to a university and I say I'm going to establish a program of urban design. So the university asks you, you have already have an architecture program, you have a planning program. So here is a new program. So what is that which makes this stand out? So it's not a question of definition, because the definition is always a bit philosophical, it's slippery. But we should be able to spell out in some form as to what we are going to do about what we are going to do.
I prefer to speak in more concrete terms than what you were talking about. And I think like this, that I think of an urban designer, if I was forced to give a definition, I think of an urban designer as an architect who is proficient in working in the public realm. So as you have many of the skills that an architect has, but you are working in the public realm, which is different because you will have many stakeholders. You will have to deal with legal issues of the sort that you didn't have to deal as an architect. You will have to negotiate with lots of people, etc. You are also the professional who can make the rules by which architects would operate. So we would be the people who would make the bylaws, and we have the good sense to not to think about the collective, how all these people building their buildings in their own way can make it work as one. So very simply, I am able to write bylaws that apply across a mosaic of plots, and I am able to design in the public realm. So all the land that is between buildings, I'm able to sort of work on it, which has a special skill. I'll just add one more thing, and I'll stop with that. To be able to do this, you need some special skills. I think for example, to be a landscape designer, you have to think like a landscape designer. Now, thinking in our profession is not about holding your chin and sitting like this and thinking and imagine. You have to draw while you think, because you draw to be able to think. You draw. Drawing and thinking is the same thing. We all know that as architect. So to think landscape thoughts, you need to be able to draw like a landscape. You can't draw a tree. If you can't draw a topography, you can't think like a landscape design. So you can't put a proposition there saying, it should be like this. So the first thing that I think, and I believe that's what we do here at CEPT, is to think like an urban designer. You have to draw like an urban designer. You have to be able to draw urban landscapes, which is not something that comes automatically. As soon as you have that tool, now you can draw alternative urban landscapes. So first ability you need is the ability to draw like an urban designer. That's to start with. As I said, actual problem solving in real life, you will learn only in the office. You won't learn. You will equip the person with all the skills to operate in an office. But the first thing I look for from somebody who comes to work in the office, can you draw like an urban designer? Can you draw me a landscape? Can you draw me an urban fabric? Such as a landscape architect would say, can you draw me a landscape? If you can't draw a landscape, how do you think a landscape? So that's the first thing I'd say.
So what you're saying, if I sort of try to summarize it to just push it around, is that it's not without reason it's called design program. So it's a design. So design meaning not just identifying problem, but actually proposing a solution, putting things together, leading up to building it and making it. But this design, unlike other design, is that it operates in the urban condition, in the urban environment. So there is a distinct class of problems that this design handles as against other design disciplines. So if that makes for some neat summary.
I think basically what I heard with this was that the ability to operate at that scale, and that's a different scale altogether than be making a building or a campus.
So,
So
Sourabh,
the
shall I,
ability-
instead of using scale, can I put it as a class of problem? That is, you're basically working at an urban condition. It could be, as you're shown, a street, and it could be like the Bindi Bazaar or something like that. So it can operate at multiple scales. So scale may not be one of the aspect of the problems, but may not be the substantial condition of the.
True, but I was saying, so one is to operate at that scale of those conditions, but I think what Nishant is saying is very pertinent to have the ability to get under the skin of the culture and the identity of a place. I think that soft skill is very critical, which somehow gets lost in just looking
So
at
this
it.
is, we are adding another layer to the definition, but I'm just keeping it bare bones as the other presentation said. It's a bare bone core. That's it. That's that core around which we can build different sheets. So,
I think, yeah, I think I'm totally in support of what Professor Srivathsan was saying.
Okay.
Because if you look at nomenclature, etymology of words, I mean, the meaning, urban design, it's design. Design means it's a human intervention to solve the problems in and around you. That is what design is. So it is engineering. It is a skill. So urban design means it is a skill that is being taught to solve the problems of human being within an urban or within their place where they are living. So that contains all the things that is being discussed here. So it is basically design of the habitat.
Sure. So just to very quickly add, we spoke about putting that design on the table and having that in a way that it speaks for itself. I also think that we've discussed this last 2 years, 2 days, a lot about being able to communicate well and persuade as well. So I do think a skill that urban designers need is to be able to communicate and persuade, because you do need to do that at all levels, from the political leader to that slum dweller that you're speaking to.
so yeah. See. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, building on Ashwathi's point, when we look at public projects, what is the role of an urban designer often comes into question, because I think in academia it makes sense. We're talking about quality of life, enhanced lived experience, and so on. But at the end of the day, I think we're also making profitable projects. The economics of public space design is something that we have to fundamentally accept, and this is not a problem, but this is actually an opportunity we're presenting. And once the larger public, being the dumb client or the government, is able to understand that, then our value sort of gets to the next level.
Okay. I'm going to take some comments and observations. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to add one simple idea that I think of urban design as a professional, or a professional who's focused on understanding the relationship between the building and the public domain. So idea is, how do you design the public space and the relationship between the buildings and the public space. Someone who is focused on that. Now, if we look at planners, and they are broad brushing the whole thing, right? They're talking about zoning, they're talking about regulations at some levels, but broadly zoning and street networks. Architects are saying, give me my plot kind of idea. Once I have the plot, I'll focus on regulations. But this is a professional who would say that I understand the relationship between the public place design, and therefore architectural skills are necessary, and the relationship between how the built form will eventually make this space work. So I think that is something that does capture, in my opinion, what an urban designer can and should do. And therefore, all the work that we do at CEPT, for the educational programs and the profession, could focus on this idea, is my thought.
Another compulsory question for all of you. Now, so let's say we have not completely resolved, but we have some idea about it. We'll park that aside. We'll move to the next point.
Can I just add one small, because I think it
go
won't
ahead,
come
go
back.
ahead. No,
So
go. You can come back.
So to me, design is always about taking a condition to a better condition. And I feel sometimes we get lost in solving problems. So I don't think it's necessarily about solving problems only. It's about improving a condition. And I think that's where
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't necessarily, it's evolution. I would say an empty plot may not be a problem. So it's not that.
Yeah. No, I think we may get into a little bit of semantics here, from here to there, and if whether here to there itself is a problem or not, etc. So I think basically all of us are committed to improving the urban condition through design, and that's the core concern. Yeah, so that's broadly thing. So of course, it's easy to get a consensus when all of us are urban designers. So whenever you try to do that with planners, maybe you may have a different view about it. So let's move to the next point. So which I would again one brief comments from all of you. Since most of you are practitioners and you've sort of broadly understood what urban design and you practice urban design. So my question is, what are the challenges facing urban design in India? And how have you tackled them? So you could just probably take 1 or 2 points as the illustration. Yeah? So we'll start this time Vastu-wise.
I think, as urban designers, we are concerned. There are many challenges. So I'll just pick on one. As an urban designer, you are concerned with the form of the city or portions of the city. How and the form of our cities is determined by building regulations. These building regulations are treated in our country like religious edicts that have to be followed. The outcome that you get is the poor outcome that our cities are. And yet, these bylaws are not challenged, primarily because we are a society that considers any traditional rules that are given as a given. And we're still a traditional society, and so somehow that spills over. In my work, the way I've worked on it, is that found every opportunity to actually start working on the bylaws regime and to change the bylaws regime and to wrest it out of, in a sense, the mechanism that just now through which the bylaws are made and say, listen, this is not the way to think about bylaws. You need to think about it differently. So inserting yourself, that's a big challenge. The way to do it is persuade people who are in positions of power, make sense, do research, show what better outcomes can be, etc. At this point, unless you are able to do it that way, so insert yourself in strategic positions where you can influence how the bylaws are made. You do a lot more that way.
Yeah, I think I have a very, 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 very different sort of a concern. So, as an organization that works with the government and when we work on various projects, one of the big challenges that we faced in the past was to get good urban designers to be hired by the cities. And it all sort of rests with good RFPs. Sometimes cities are so happy working with the local contractor that they're doing and they just want to follow that same practice. So the focus at that particular point was to really get the cities to understand the need to hire good urban designers, improve their awareness, advocate for that, and then help them or encourage them to draft RFPs that would get all of these good urban designers onto the board. And we have many of them who are being churned out every year, for example, from this university and many universities that many of you all sort of work with as well. Now the big challenge, so that was the biggest challenge for me a few years back. Now once we got these urban designers hired by the city, now the next challenge is for them to be paid at regular intervals in the way that they were promised to, which is still a long way to go. So of course, depending on how many years your organization has been and how big your organization is, you might have different ways of working with the system, especially with young professionals who would now start working with the government. I do think that's a big gap that I think we do need to build in.
So
So I think I will build on that because my problem is actually that the RFPs that get done are very limiting because I feel the role is far more at the vision and the program level as well, which doesn't get allowed. And I know the limitations, so it's not a comment on that. It's more about how it one needs to understand that somebody has to think about what that city needs, even in terms of a vision and a program. There is no job description of that, and there is no way to put a value on that as well. Because it is only after investigation, after dwelling deep, can you come up with those things. So how does one already get an RFP or a pay for something you don't know will come out? And I think that's where I feel is the biggest challenge as an urban designer, the vision and the program getting embedded. We try and bring that value a lot more because our practice generally tries to balance out public and private work. And we just say that that's the investment we make. But it's because of that we feel that the projects get enriched and that city precinct really can get fully nourished.
Your question was about challenges in India. And I'd say, I'm fairly new to India in terms of practice. It's only been 4 years since I've been back, and I would look back at my time in Singapore and juxtapose some of the conditions. And as all of us are aware, it was great working in Singapore, but it was also easy and perfect in a way that there is a certain political commitment, the economic resources, everybody falls in line. An urban designer gets, a lot of priority in meetings, and it's easy to push certain agendas. And I was coming from that bubble, and now planting myself in India. And I think the first challenge is looking at the complexity and chaos, something that we've talked about in previous presentations, and to be able to embrace it, moving away from that notion of sanitizing to embracing the chaos and what that means. I'm still discovering, and that's what makes urban design exciting. So I think that's one of the points that I think we have to look at.
Have you embraced reforms and solutions?
Still figuring this out. I think one of the things I do as a consultant for the World Bank, for to take a particular concrete example, is to work with the government of Tamil Nadu on some of the issues that you were talking about. How can we improve regulations? How can we look at affordable housing at a policy level? And now, of course, that's a little bit beyond the urban design realm. But once we're able to embrace some of those aspects, then automatically the trickle down to urban design happens.
I think moving to India for last 10 years, and the biggest challenge I see here is how does the value of urban design thinking gets communicated in the larger public. And I think that's an action plan which should be taken, because I see that even if you have these great urban plans, and, and I think great urban plans are an enabling framework. And how do we communicate that in terms of economics, maybe green spaces, social good? That that should be a very important focus of what happens in urban design.
I do have a different story to tell you. In fact, as far as the profession is concerned, in Kerala, you know, one challenge that I was facing was with Amrit program and the JNRM projects coming in. There were a number of projects that has been identified in every city and town, and those were all small scale, redoing street widening or maybe creating small space. The type of projects that happen with this type of this thing, and mostly architects are working on that. But when it came to a kind of a review, because I was a part of the panel which was reviewing the Amrit projects, the major problem that I found was these were all independent projects which has nothing to do with the society or the community, and many a times these projects were a failure. Basically, because of the lack of understanding, it was not connected to the community or the society. So when I was conversing with these officials, government officials, they were not able to understand what I was speaking. So I had to teach them what urban design is. And luckily, what happened was during the same time, the IUDI initiative, the National Council decided that urban design should go to different parts of India. It shouldn't be Delhi centric. It has to go to smaller towns. And we conducted our first national conference in Kollam, IUDI National Conference that happened in 2019. And as part of the national colloquium, we were able to bring in the entire councillors, the corporation councillors, the mayor, everybody was part of this particular colloquium, and they sat there, the MPs, the MLAs, and the entire political mechanism sat with us, with the urban designers of this country, and we discussed about what urban design is, and we were able to tell them what the role of urban designers is in the society. And you know what exactly happened after that? Around 36 public parks in Kollam city got revamped, and they included urban designers as panel members. So urban design as a profession was accepted in that Kollam corporation, and later this was taken up by different corporations. Now government has decided that urban designers should be a part of this, and we are moving ahead. LSGD has accepted our request. We have given a letter. Now, probably, if it goes well, LSGD will announce for urban designers, local self-government department. They have agreed that urban designers should be part of every corporation. And I think that this is a role model which we can emulate, and we have to move as an institution. But I feel that for that, all of us have to stand together. So the institute is having a major role to play here.
So I'll come to that collective question a little later. So now I'm just going to pose the question to three academics, yeah, who's running the urban design program here. In the light of what is being posed as the challenges, what do you think the academic programs should do to sort of engage with this problem or equip students with this problem? Or do you, first of all, I'm assuming you agree with this challenge. If you disagree, you can say so.
No, no. I mean, I agree that there are many challenges for sure. But I think that one of the critical challenge, and which in my mind is very vivid, is that we have not been able to generate enough evidence-based studies or research to support or to make sense of the extremely fast-paced projects that are now needed. So while there is a demand for a lot of urban design to happen, but there's nothing backing it up. So there's sometimes, or there are more chances in the future as well, if we don't start this process, for them to become very individual centric sometimes, and all of that. So I feel that what if we can infuse, and I think here I'm trying for that. We have a course focused on evidence-based urban studies as a part of urban design. So what we try to do is to hypothesize what are the why is this happening there? Can you think about that condition and then find out the parameters that lead you to that? Therefore, informing that these are the conditions, the relationships between variety of things. If we start doing that more and more and start engaging with the municipal corporations and other organizations, I think we will be able to make more sense. So rather than I would say rather than, I mean, everything is necessary, but this is something that I feel very important.
Melissa, you run an undergraduate program, so how do you view this?
So I think one thing that I would pick up from what we've been talking about, in a sense, comes from what Nishant was saying with the understanding of the larger city. But to specify that, I think that we need to train our students to be able to quantify impact, not just looking at their projects in terms of a design and how do I make a design and come out with it, but also to be able to assess to people who are not in the design field why this project matters and makes sense. And that would require basic analytical understanding of social issues or of maybe non-physical, non-spatial systems that accompany the typical urban problems. So I think that's a major component that gets into, it requires teaching things like economics, things like data analysis, qualitative and quantitative, and I think those are core skills that we need to have, which are very different than you would find in, say, an architecture program that you're coming from.
I think I was trying to, I'm just trying to zoom out from the design discussion. And since you said, how do you look at it when you look at it from a course which is housed in planning school? And what I think is that while design is an essential part and the core of it, and as Bimal said, one needs to know how to draw. I think if you want to make them practice ready apprentice, then it has to be design plus plus. And that plus is to sensitize them about who is going to fund these projects, how are they going to get money for it, how are they going to read the RFPs and design it, how is it going to get operated, maintained, and whether their design space will get used, misused. So that sensitization is very essential, and we have sort of begun to do a bit of it by courses in the foundation program, or even at the community level, some courses on finance, economics, all of that. So I think that's something where I would like to add my 2 cents on design plus thing. Yeah.
Sourabh, I'm just, we were discussing that urban design practice is at its nascent stage, it's building up. So, what do you think one should do to expand opportunities, to create more opportunities for not only urban designers, but basically for urban design projects? Suppose if somebody comes to you, an IUDA comes to you and says, let us know what we should do to push this urban design agenda, what would you recommend?
As an institute, I'm not clear.
No, as a practice. How do you create more opportunities for urban design practice?
I think, well, I really believe in going the distance and really going beyond the brief in all projects everywhere. So I really try to nudge and push and actually we send kind of figure what is the capacity and the appetite the client has to go beyond and go larger. And I would say if we all kind of see that as an ability to be able to not stick to a clear agenda or a clear brief as our profession, and if we go beyond it, we will be able to really invest ourselves into projects which are larger than what you initiate, and I think they will translate into fantastic urban realities. And I have so many examples in work in real life where it has happened, and it is just that they don't understand the need. Once you explain, once you embed yourself, you might enter in as an architect, but you can easily show how a larger vision would actually help a larger cause. I think that's a beautiful way to be able to convert projects into urban realities.
Nishant, you have some ideas?
I think the vision plan exercise is an established methodology which is successful in many contexts. However, it needs to be tested here. One of the better ways also to look at opportunities is again communicating. It may be pilot projects, it may be projects which are based on some sort of NGO understanding or activism, or actually also real estate problems can be offered solutions which are much more attractive, because I think the nature of design is changing and people are quite open to looking at interesting design ideas to communicate some value of urban design. So all these formats are available. Now, how does that happen is something to be available, because a good urban design needs good in-depth understanding, which means office time, as you were saying, as needs people's time. It needs, it needs to expand capacities. If we need an analytical framework, who will use that? Will universities use that? Who will prepare? Will firms prepare that? I mean, SOM had these SOM journals coming out, 1, 2, 3, which is really looking at their own practice as research journals. They are. So whether is that a format, or will that create more opportunity? So I think there has to be a faceted approach. All of these will offer some leverage, and we have to see what works in what context.
You have some ideas, but how do we sort of expand this possibilities?
Well, I don't know if I actually answer your question, but one thought that comes to mind is that I think as initial years when the profession is getting established, a lot of it is dependent on particularly committed individuals. You see many of them here who are going out of their way to, you know, to to show the possibilities of what can be done, and they're doing it in a way they make it work by saying, okay, I'm going to do this for free, I'm going to do this, subsidize it using my architectural practice, and they, but it cannot remain like this for very long. If this profession is to get established, then we need to be able to run profitable companies that operate straight. For it to be sustainable, we must have companies and those companies cannot be entirely individual driven or dependent on one individual. Countries where good design gets done and where capacity is high to manage architectural problems, this and that. Of course, there'll always be some mavericks, but a lot of it is based on stable firms that are able to retain experience, pass it on to the next generation. They're financially sustainable, they have the infrastructure, and they go year after year. So the big challenge for the urban design professionals who are sort of plowing ahead just now is to set up sustainable practices, uh, and not make too much uh, of the initial sort of sacrifices they make, if one might put it, to help establish the discipline. We cannot run on that, and that's not the real. I mean, yes, individuals must be complimented for doing that, but that's not their biggest. Their biggest contribution would be if this can be, like architects can run sustainable firms or planning, etc.
So, Seetha and Aswathy, do you think now, since there's a lot of focus on creating walkable cities, compact cities, all kinds of things, is this the kind of time which these side of ideas and movements are opening up more possibilities for this? So there is already some kind of a context and demand has been set up, which otherwise the individuals are practices, as Bimal was saying, we're actually trying to create that agenda and convince. But now a particular moment in time has arrived in this long journey of urbanization. So do you think this is more or less a good time for the urban designers to?
I think so. I would answer it in a couple of ways. One is, I think we also need to be cognizant of some of the larger themes that emerge. And I'm going to say this at the risk of sounding extremely practical and businesslike, but every 10 years something comes into fashion, right? And I think the top three words now are climate vulnerabilities, gender, there's a big push in that area. And the third would be, data driven planning. And a couple of more I'm sure we can identify. I think it's important that urban design capitalizes on some of these opportunities that were hitherto not existing and really help push the agenda of urban design through some of these projects and therefore be able to shine, and that gets traction and therefore will lead to ripple effects. The other part I think is very relevant today is increasing civic awareness, something I don't think we had a decade ago, where people are demanding better infrastructure. I think we saw, Delhi shut down with air pollution. At the same time, Chennai was battling floods, and people are aware that, these solutions that are predominantly engineering driven are now going to stand the test of time. So I think there are several cases in Netherlands, etc., that we can draw inspiration from. And for those who say this is all happening abroad and not in our cities, I think the Dutch love affair for cycling started off not because of a very top-down vision, but because of the fatalities and car accidents and mothers being afraid to send their children out. And that kind of civic awareness is building. And I think that is really the tipping point. Of course, coming together of the discipline with various experts does help. So I think these two areas would really be my contribution.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that this is a very good time for students to become urban design professionals. Having said that, like the way Seetha said, what I would say, and building on what Melissa said, is that it is we and being very practical, we need to have the funds that is necessary for being able to do the projects, and for that should be you should have the acumen to also understand where the funds can come from. So if you can actually tie a street design project to to climate change or to the fact that there's air pollution, and then say that you can tap into the national clean air funds. So now a city in Vijayawada that says I don't have money knows that there's a national program that's funding clean air, and they can actually get that money to do the project and pay the urban designer as well. So sometimes we think that there's someone out there, or maybe people in the government will figure this out. And if they don't, it's our job to figure it out, because at the end of the day, we want to get paid, and we'll get paid if these projects get done. And for that, there needs to be funding for those projects. So I would say make these ties, but then use the data approach to be able to clearly say that with this street, you can actually reduce emission by so much, you can reduce deaths by so much. So be able to tie all of this and actually, in very simplistic terms, sell your project better. Like when you say, what is the benefits? Speak very, very clearly with clarity about your benefits, not just show this picture looks more beautiful. We need to move beyond that.
Okay, there are a couple of things I have, but before that, I'll take one or two questions from online. So I engage with the online audience as well. So yeah, there's this. I don't know what you call the question is. It says if we the premise is if we have to learn more from practice. So the question is, would it be better to join instrument? Would it be better to join HCP for 2 years and learn from real projects than actually take admission in CEPT Urban Design program?
Can I answer that one? I would really love to take that
So
one.
I think this could be best answered by both Bimal and probably
No,
Brajesh.
because I'm very sorry. I worked at HCP and I have to answer this
Okay,
question. So I'm going to take that.
take-
Yeah. So I did my architecture and actually worked for a year in an architecture firm and then went to do my master's. And I came back and worked at HCP for many years, and I had other friends who studied with me in my bachelor's, who were working at HCP at that point. And they were working with Brijesh as well, and they were reading The Great Streets, they were reading every book that I read at my master's degree. So what I'm just trying to say is, forget whether you work with
close
HCP.
urban design program.
Yeah, so no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm basically saying is that please, if you're interested in urban design, or if you're interested in whatever that you're interested in, even if you're interested in communication, after your bachelor's, please work in an organization for a couple of years. That gives you a lot of clarity, and then do your master's.
No, but this is more provocatively put. Say this or that. So maybe
not
we
this
should
or that.
we'll hear from.
Whoever asked the question has obviously not been listening to the conversation. I think there is. I said very clearly. There's three. It's a three-legged stool for a good profession to exist. You need educational institutions that will build abilities. But education institutions cannot create professionals. Professionals, you can only create apprentice professionals. Like you create an apprentice doctor or an apprentice lawyer. Then the apprentice has to work with experienced professionals to be able to hone their skills and understand how actually problem solving is done in real life. Therefore, you also need companies that will create a learning environment for apprentices. It's the third leg of the stool, of course, is the professional institutions. They have another role to play. Unless we create this symbiotic sort of system, this synergistic system, whereby you are able to create apprentices and environments in which they can get the hard skills, we will not build a profession. So I'd say that answers the question. You need both. You need companies like HCP or various others that are here. Sourabh has a big practice, does a lot of work. And you need young people that come out of programs need to be able to work with experienced professionals. And that's crucial. Without that, you cannot hope to just battle it on your own. This is true for architecture, this is true for planning, this is true for urban design.
Okay, Brajesh, are they coming to you only for degree or coming for something else? Is what he's asking. So apart from endorsing Bimal, you have to say something else also.
It's going to be difficult, but I'll try. I think what I feel, see, in the profession, so if you join an office, it is obvious that day one you will be expected to produce something at the end of the day. What do you have? Today I want this because tomorrow I have a submission. That's a profession, that's a practice. In an educational setup, there is an opportunity for someone to understand what are the processes to get there, because things look difficult. I mean, as soon as architects join the new program and when they look at a master plan, they say, my God, how do you reach there? And through a systematic set of steps, a process that they follow, we follow through the semester, they have a master plan at the end. And they, I mean, when they look at it from afar, they see the value of that. So I think there is, I don't see a debate there, in my opinion. I think it's not no debate, because I think there is a value in learning processes and then joining there where you are productive day one, and then you can jump into doing better, more better things and whatever you want. So I don't
Melissa?
believe this is okay to just join.
I'll agree. I think the educational setting provides the framework, the critical framework that you can use to be more effective in the office and to be able to link different things together. Because when you get people in an office, and I come at this from the actually also from the office side, when you get people in the office who cannot work across problems or who can only do very specific skilled things, then you can't use them very well and you end up doing a lot more work. So it's the degree provides that, which allows them to also grow and take over things for you.
Okay, audience, the message is, sorry.
I mean, that's, I think one of the fine qualities of CEPT, which has remained right through, is that this is an institution where a large number of practitioners are involved. There are some people who are pure academics, but there are a large number of practitioners. From day one, for 60 years, CEPT has been led by a professional and a practicing professional, not an academic professional. That's what makes CEPT. Here we uniquely understand the importance of practice, and we understand the importance of academics. And we understand that the two have, no country, no society can build a capacity unless both are working. So sometimes we see these walls and people tend to get jealous of each other. But at CEPT, there is no such wall, because there are people, in the afternoon, go back to their office. You have Brijesh, you have Melissa, you have everybody like that here. Everybody running programs. So this conundrum perhaps affects somebody who is not really understood what.
Okay, audience, the message is clear. First come to CEPT, get your degree, and then you can possibly go elsewhere. Okay, any of the practices that you've heard or many more are outside. Okay, thank you for asking that question. Now, another question from online, probably I'll ask Sourabh. Instead of government telling us that what to develop and how to develop, can't we find issues and propose a solution for that? So I assume they're saying we should be more proactive than what we are now. I mean, I take that as the spirit of the question. So are we proactive as a collective? Or,
As a collective?
and also individually. I mean, we are still not there as a collective, I'm assuming, but
I think it's kind of repeating itself. So the idea is that you will have to go out, create that awareness, and then create that need. So there are more RFPs to fulfill that need. But that you have to walk that distance. So you've got to walk that talk. So I think create that awareness so that that vacuum gets filled by the need of urban design, which currently is definitely a big issue.
But Srivathsan, does it have to be either or? It's always going to be both. It's always sometimes we tend to, and very counterproductive to think of government as if it is some, that's the voice of the people. When people who are elected tell you what they want, they are elected to talk for the people. So you must, sometimes they come and tell you, sometimes you go there and say, perhaps you should try this. And both things are going to work, not either or.
okay. Coming to the question of collective. Now, there are two collectives very well established. They're doing reasonably, okay, they're doing some good job. And, the Indian Institute of Architects and Council on one side, as a collective of of architects, and ITPI for the planners. So what should be the nature of the IUDI collective? Do you draw the IUDI collective or the urban design collective? Something similar to this, for example, should IUDI start working on how to work out urban design contracts? How do you negotiate? How do you help paying practitioners? Do you have to give a sample of contract? How do you do? How do you model an urban design collective? Are these two good examples? Well, you don't have to say bad, but you can say you can do better. But what should be the nature of the urban design collective? I'm no better person than Manoj here to. Yeah.
As we all know that IUDI established almost like in 2007, and it's in the process of building up, and we are spreading out to almost all the different centers, but yet Ahmedabad is not there in that somehow. We are expecting that Ahmedabad also should join in this, collective. And frankly speaking, there are several areas which we have to seriously discuss as part of this IUDI collective. And I think as the secretary of IUDI, we are in the process of that. We'll be in touch with all the professionals all over India. I personally feel that we do have doyens in this field all over India who are experts, who do have a say and who can seriously mentor and be part of this. And if you look at IAA, if you look at the history of IAA, and if you look at the way how COA was formed, with we had legislators like Piru Modi who played a major role, in establishing the profession in India. I strongly feel that we have to have people like that who does have a say in the government and who does have a say in the society should lead. Should come into the leadership of this institution so that we'll be able to establish. I think that's something which is very very important. So, as I said, that our profession itself in nascent stage. Obviously, these are the challenges that we are facing. We have to confront, and as Dr. Bimal Patel was saying in the morning, we are in the process. So it should happen, and I am positive. I think that maybe within next few years, we will be able to establish this.
I mean, would you ask for something specific like as the ITPI says?
Yes.
You should only recruit planners for this kind of job.
No, see,
would you be doing that kind of lobbying?
I was just mentioning this earlier also. Like we, as an organization or as a profession, still we are yet to fix up all those parameters, and we don't have anything related to consultancy or how to do consultancy. What sort of how can we involve? Any of such things are still not clear for the profession as such. So I think that we may have to have a large consortium where lead urban designers should sit together and discuss and come out with a solution to that. And it has to happen. Otherwise, I don't think that anything that we have discussed will go ahead. It has to happen.
Yeah, please go ahead. So are you offering to set up a IUDI Ahmedabad?
If there was an IUDI Ahmedabad, what should we do? And that's what I'm thinking about. So for example, IUDI meaning any organization, any central, such as idea of IUDI Institute, I think the agenda has to be clear. What is the agenda? Current agenda seems to be to propagate the idea or to convince the government authorities or people in general of the idea of urban design. So, for example, if IUDI were to work so hard, and today we've seen so many projects, today, yesterday, we've seen so many good urban design projects happening in India. If we identify these projects and push them through and say, look at this work, this is urban design, look at that, that's urban design. I think that would be a fantastic job that IUDI can do, right? Because then you can at least, you don't have to constantly say that, oh, yeah, I don't know what urban design does, it's between this and that. No, it is this. This is what urban design does. See, go in there, let's go, let's visit. I think those are the kind of activities that IUDI could get into and therefore build a larger idea of pushing the idea of how urban designers work, etc. That's my suggestion.
Yes, I totally accept that. In fact, the new general body has come into place after the elections recently, just 2 months back, and it's in the process of building up. Obviously, we will be in touch with the Ahmedabad Center. I wish all of you should be a part of that.
Okay,
That's my request.
The so, yeah?
Okay. No, I was just going to add in terms of your question, it sounded very specific, right? Should we help by drafting contracts and how RFPs should be done, etc. I do think it would be quite valuable for young practices. We talked a lot about learning by doing, which is great. But if there is a body of knowledge that one can easily access, that helps. But I think one thing that we need to think about is being overly prescriptive, which something that the architects, the Council of Architecture talks about mandating fees. Of course, we talk about this ad nauseum. Has it led to anything in practice? No. I mean, it helps for the outlier situations, but mostly 99% of the time, those fees are not at the levels prescribed. So, in an environment where regulation is cannot be implemented or enforced, I think we need to improve ourselves as a
Now,
profession in
instead of a
skills.
prescriptive fees, can it be a suggestive fees, not non-binding? There's no question of violation. Just to give some idea of sense of scale, level of effort. To that level of effort, what should be the level of charges? Something like that.
The suggestive scale helps understand how you can peg yourself when you're offering the services, but it doesn't really help, eventually in getting paid, I guess.
It's also it's also scope driven. Each project has its individual scope, which is sort of outlined by the stakeholders. So a generalized fee may not be easy.
No, point taken, but it's a budding profession. There are young professionals. So, what is the professional practice of urban design looks like or should look like is something that constantly would come to question. But that's the spirit of the question.
If there's an organization, how does it measure its success? That's the question one has to ask. What's a successful organization? How does it measure its success? As soon as you decide that, I mean, do you decide? There's one education institution. I don't want to name it. One sort of association that I once designed a building for. They started measuring their success on the basis of their turnover. As soon as you start looking at just turnover in an education type institution, you destroyed the purpose of doing that. If you have an association, if your measure of success is how many members you have, is that the right measure? How many centers have we been able to establish? Is that the right measure? So you have to decide what's the measure. And I think for an organization that is meant to be a professional organization, the measure has to be somehow related to what value you are able to create for the profession. That is the measure. It doesn't matter whether you have 500 members or you have 50 members, but what value are you able to, what is it of value that you produce that everybody cherishes? Okay? That practices believe, oh, thank God they are there because they're producing that of value. And that's really the question one must ask. So how's the measure of success? What's the measure of success? And that once that an organization answers and gets it, this is the amount of clout we have, this is the amount of power we have, this is the size we have, turnover we have. These are various measures. Okay, and each one will lead you in a different direction. And really, that's the question to ask. I mean, it's not no. Yeah, that's the key thing. What you're doing for the profession.
I think in a collective, just to follow up Bimal's point, is also how simple things can be effective. Just from other agencies and organizations, a simple thing like job postings can be incredibly helpful for young urban designers, which none of the collectives are able to undertake. The nature of job postings also are very descriptive of the nature of the work emerging. So nowadays, there's no clear UD professional required. There's a lot of subtle, details which are coming in, which offers us the insight. I think that is a sort of an emerging give and take happening between the organization and the emerging field and the need in the offices. So, and the students are able to understand that. I think collective, we are a little late in stage to frame a top-down approach. We have to do a lot of things parallelly. So split some of the work, do analytical framework, somebody does a fee analysis, but it has to be all done sequentially.
The balance sheet at the end of the year should be this is what value we created. Now, what is that? That how did we support? What did we do? We support the expansion or the deepening or the development of the profession in some ways. How did we do that? That has to be proven. It cannot be in very abstract terms, or we created, understanding or something. It has to be something measurable that you can actually check and say, this is how we are doing, creating value. Like, for example, when he says job posting, I think that's a terrific idea. Here's how many people we help get placed. That's a number. So what's the measurable good that an organization is giving? Is that what has to be established? And once that is established, and not in abstract, nebulous terms, that we are improving things in general. And that's, that becomes the reason for setting up a center or something like that. What's it of value that is produced?
I'll take a few comments or questions from the floor. Anyone? Anything? It doesn't have to be a question. You could just make a suggestion. Please, Manoj.
Thank you. I actually, I don't know whether it's the fact that I'm here after 10 years as an alumni, or I feel like I'm in the shoes of the students, and I actually want to talk to the students and tell them, don't freak out. The session was absolutely scary. It could be scary for you guys. And I just want to say that if all of you have some kind of love for understanding complexities or settlements, you're okay. Everything else you can figure out on the way out. These guys are like established, they have savings, they can take the risk, and they're going forward. You will only get to that in a few years, so don't freak out. If you just like what you're doing, I think you guys are okay. Just want to add that. Thanks.
Okay, that must be sounding reassuring. But I thought we were also quite reassured. We were talking about possibilities and how to help and how to build. Balaji, you're saying as if we are scaring. I thought the comments were very positive. We'll do it at the end. As Bimal says, success is a measure. So, go ahead, Bimal. Any more? Anything else?
If I could just add.
Yeah, please.
So we were talking about, what should a collective that comes together do. I think when we were having, firstly I agree, that this is a great time to be here, and it's a great time to be an urban designer. So there's no reason whatsoever to freak out. But having said that, I don't think we as a collective don't have a responsibility to make sure that all of us don't freak out, So on that sense, about what the collective can do. I do think, for example, Srivathsan, you're talking about urbanization and the opportunities that urbanization provides. And I also hear what Bimal was talking about, the fact that if we have political leaders, then they definitely, we voted for them and they definitely know, and maybe they have a thing to say as well. And I agree with both political and bureaucrats, but I've also heard some of them who come and say that I didn't do this before because I didn't know. Today, when I know this, I'm a great champion, and I continue to champion. So as a result, we as a collective do have the responsibility of bringing that awareness and then letting them make that decision. But bringing that awareness is important because, when I was working with HCP, we heard about Bimal doing CG Road in 1983 when I was born. Pardon me? 80? 96. Okay, 94, 96. Great.
Okay,
So, yeah, I was young. And now again, we're doing that same street again, but Ahmedabad has grown and it probably has hundreds of kilometers. So, how do we make sure that this opportunity that we're talking about, urbanization, really scales up? And how do we as a collective capture that opportunity and support our cities to become much better places with our bureaucrats and political leaders together. So that's
Okay, this is, I thought she's joined Balaji, but finally she's come back to the seat where she is. So good to hear that conclusion. Thank you for that. It's been a long day, so I'm going to wrap this session with one mandatory question for all of you. What are the two developments you would like to see for the advancement of urban design in India? So we'll start from this side. What, you have to be very specific. Two things. What two things that you would like to see for the advancement? You can recall something that you have said. You don't have to put an original answer in the sense, I mean, it is yours, but
I mean, I personally take things positive. So here, one thing what I seriously wanted to tell was possibly many of the questions were very much focused to. So two things, if you ask me, I'm just trying to reply what Bimal sir was asking me. First and foremost, I think all of us should work together as a collective to uphold the value of this profession and bring this profession into a legal framework which has to have a say in the whole system of the country. One. Second thing is propagate the type of projects that we are doing here. Only thing is, I am 100% sure that these projects that we have focused here, showcased here since last 2 days, nobody else, no other professional can do. Only urban designers can do such projects. I don't think that this type of projects can be done by planners. This type of projects can be done by architects. This projects can be done by conservation architects. No, only urban designers can do that. Propagate this. These are the two things.
okay. Good. Very firm bold answer. Balaji, we are not scaring anyone here.
I think the two things I really want to see in India is an increase in research in urban design, because I think there's a lot of design research which needs to be done. So they articulated well to encourage the meaning of urban design much further, the value of urban design, the social good. It's all it's a linked understanding. So I would like to see more of that. And there's also a sense of simplicity which design can offer. And I would like to see simple designs offering much more effect in the public realm.
You're putting us in a spot with two things, and I'm going to respond with two answers, which I don't know if we have control of. But the first one is, I think there was a discussion on funding, right? I think at the end of the day, these large projects take off or don't, depending on who's funding them and whether the funding is steady. So I think unless there is a very strong sort of municipal resource mobilization at that level, can we start to see small, numerous projects that can then scale and really be making an impact in urban design. So that is one thing I think that could happen in India. The second is this, of course, over the last decade, increasing awareness on stakeholder participation. In every conference, we talk about this a lot. But I think for both stakeholders and us to understand that stakeholders are not just the problem, but part of the solution. I just earlier mentioned how stakeholders are demanding better infrastructure, but I think they still have to understand that they're part of the solution as well. So for us to work together, I think if both of these could happen, we'd have a lot more projects.
So I would say the first is to really the kind of work we've seen and spoken about, I think to build up on these success stories. I think it's a great opportunity. So I would really hope that people build up on it and take this much further, like, really the ambition. And I also feel having the young audience around here, I think it's almost like an opportunity to take responsibility and have impact. So I think it should actually be taken as this massive opportunity that you have that can have visible, viable impact. And that's the beauty of this profession.
Yeah, so I would focus on two things, like I already said. One is that look at all of these projects, but whenever you do these projects, we also be very clear about talking about what the impacts of these projects would be, because that's where you'll be able to tie and then get funding for these projects. And then the next very important thing is the whole concept what we spoke about, the win-win situation. And think about how you communicate this project effectively, where, for example, what do you highlight to a particular stakeholder? So if you're talking to the traffic police, speak about how you will reduce the road deaths. But if you're talking to maybe the political leader, speak about how the traffic is going to flow seamlessly. So all of these are win-win pieces of your solution, but choose what you say where and choose what you highlight. And I really hope that we focus on that communication as well.
Well, I'd like to see municipal corporations start hiring urban designers. That'd be one really good development. So that you have at the other end somebody to talk to who's talking your language. The second thing, I'd like there to be a law that says that for every bylaw that is made, building bylaw, they have to record in writing evidence-based reasons for why that law has been made. Because mostly all those laws are written without any supporting evidence that they actually make sense. So I'd like a law that requires laws to be written along with their underpinning rationale, supported by empirical evidence.
Thank you all, and it's been 2 good days. At least I thought it was 2 good days. Listening to all this one great initiatives. One may have different opinions about it, but there is absolutely no doubt that these are very significant projects. They're pushing this not only discipline, but they're actually trying to find solutions to problems, improve life, see something is actually done, and making a difference to how things they are and how better it could become. So that is the core content of all the projects, and the discussions are also in that spirit. One may ask a very pessimistic question or skeptical question, and it's very well engaged with that question because that's how we move forward. And I thank all the participants who have come, and thanks for traveling and coming in person, because we thought this online is getting a little too much. It's a fatigue. So for a change, we just come and meet. We have good lunch and good conversations, and also dinner yesterday. So I was probably the spoil sport. I said it's too late. But thank you all for the participants for coming and braving this uncertainty to be here and with us all. And thank you, participants. Of course, we had to wait for you for 30 minutes this morning. I understand Saturday morning. I thought it'd be a good time to come, but I understand these are also practicalities. If I don't demonstrate what an urban designer could adjust and improvise. So thank you all for all your support. And I'm not going to name the people who helped us conduct, but there was this whole large team, and some of them you could have seen. Who really worked hard, and streaming. We have been streaming for 2 days, and we have been getting good audiences online as well. Thanks for them, and thanks again. And hopefully, we should be able to do this as an annual event. Hopefully, and we'll try and keep it as meaningful and as relevant as possible. Every conversation that we have. Thanks. Have a good night and have a good Sunday.